Hello, everyone, and welcome to our religion in fantasy / world building stream. And don't worry, this will not become a religious flame war. At least I hope it won't. Anyway, allow me to bring in my guests, starting with my perpetual co-host, Neph Champion. And there we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you all.
Lovely to see you too, as ever, Neph. Also, welcome, the Wise Wolf. Let me get him.
The current Wolf Lord of the Space Wolves is Logan Grimnar, also known as the Old Wolf. He rules from the Hall of the Great Wolf, together with his Wolf Lords such as Herald Deathwolf, Eagle Ironwolf, and Bjorn Stormwolf.
All I got out of that was wolf, 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 and wolf.
The Space Wolves are incredibly uninspired.
Good evening, pagans, heathens, non-believer, and all infidels.
That works.
Well, someone had to say it.
Yep.
That's
also,
true.
Welcome, Drake the Duelist.
He's going right for the crew!
That's me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight. Losing my religion.
That's fantastic. I love it. Anyway, please welcome our guest.
Jesus Christ был коммунист!
Communism is not a religion, you fucking idiot.
Yeah, tell that to Brezhnev.
Okay, we're only 5 minutes in. We're about to have a holy war on our hands.
We're
Great.
not even 5 minutes in, you silly wolf.
That's what I said. We're not even 5 minutes in, and we're already have a holy war on our hands.
Well, speaking of religious iconography,
My old enemy. You cannot hide from me.
Where's that from?
welcome to Crimson Scorpio. First time on the I think second time on the show.
I appeared on maybe one other, and then I was like, "There, you got one of your Cards Against Humanity streams." But thank you for having me.
Alrighty, welcome. So we've got a fun topic today: religion and fantasy. It's a very unique It's a topic that's kind of becoming a little bit more popular nowadays. Now that kind of like a lot of people are kind of saying, let's kind of put some more of a flavor into our fantasy worlds and make it a little bit more like our own.
Well, I think that it's interesting to distinguish between two avenues, and there's two aspects to this whole conversation. Right? There's the cosmological aspect, which is more like the fun stuff about what exactly is going on, and then there's the sociological aspect, which for a long time has kind of been misunderstood. In modernity, let's say. But so there are two aspects to really tangle with here.
Yeah,
And there are
that's a
two
good
ways
idea. I'd like to
that
elaborate on the sociological part. The thing that I find really interesting are the three relations of religion. How religion relates, first of all, to the cosmos. Is it true? Are there competing religions? is there a scam religion going around? Are the gods, do they take this thing seriously? Do they laugh at it? So how does religion relate to the cosmos that you've created? How does religion relate to the individual? What's the man on the street's motivation for getting his butt to church or to the ritual or to however they function on it? What do they get out of it? Why are they forced to do it? And how does the religion relate to the structures of power within the world? Why does the government, the king, the Grand Poobah, whoever, why do they permit the church to run around spreading their doctrines? Do they have some sort of arrangement? Is there a power struggle between them? Are they one and the same, perhaps? How does the religion interact in those three areas, not just with the cosmology itself?
Makes sense.
And then you have to decide whether or not you want your religion to be monotheistic or polytheistic. Yeah.
Or dualistic, where my Zoroastrian's at.
Yeah, you have
or Manichaeanism.
Yeah, you have the Valor symbol there in the monotheist camp, but that's Manichaean. Valorism is Manichaean.
Yeah, or at least like it's kind of I just put it as monotheist because like they only worship Valor, they just count the.
No, yeah, it belongs in this sort of category. It does more than the other, more than a pagan pantheon.
Yeah, since Manichaeanism, I guess one example is the Cathars of a more Manichaean Christian religion. It was a heretic sect. I'm also just thinking about because that's been on my brain lately because
you talking about the Albigensian Crusade?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was. Since that's my senior thesis, that's been on my brain for the past few days. So, but yeah, in terms of a monotheist religion, usually monotheist religion, they have a very most like monotheist religions in our own history. It's mostly variations on the same doctrines, usually.
Yes, all three of
the Abrahamic religions.
Yep.
Yeah.
All three have the same first book, let's call it.
Well, they propose sort of like roughly the same founding myth of humanity, let's say, and they also propose the same, roughly the same metaphysics, especially if you get into the classical forms of them.
Yeah.
And then there's the question of is your divine being at the center of the everything? Is it necessarily a sentient force? Then you could get into things like the Tao in Taoism, where it's not so much like a being that you could have a personal relationship with, so much as a force of the universe that constantly approaches balance.
Yeah, in like classical medieval Thomistic thinking, which is reference to Thomas Aquinas, they came up with the doctrine of analogy because they said there's no way we can talk about this thing, because it has components, because it doesn't have components, and gets into the concept of divine simplicity. So we have to come up with analogies, because if we can't talk about this thing in terms of analogy, we're done. We can't even talk about it.
And if you can't talk about it, you can't teach it.
You can't really do anything. You can't really do anything at that point.
Yeah.
Because
if you can't talk about it, those sermons are going to get pretty boring eventually.
Yeah, because
that's true.
Yeah, because the reverse of it is making it an actual like my favorite phrase, my phrase uses super Zeus, that gets quashed. There are metaphysical problems with that. But
yeah, there's. I think that's also in terms of monotheist being variations on like a similar theme. Like it's mostly like pretty much all heretic groups are pretty much variations on Christianity with new ideas, usually informed by rejection of a certain usually like rejection of ritual is usually the
sometimes the early heretics were quite insignificant doctrinal differences. Like, for example, you had the early heresy of Arianism, which is not a reference to the Nazis, but it refers basically it sort of like mistook like the quote unquote nature of Jesus Christ, which was a huge deal, which is what the Council of Nicaea was made to sort of hammer out. So I don't I can get into that if you want, but I don't know if that's pertinent.
Or even before that, the Docetists. The idea that the Christ was a being of pure spirit, which to a lot of early Christians was blasphemy, because if Jesus Christ was not mortal, how could his sacrifice mean anything? He'd just be fiddling around with the cosmic,
No, yeah, he has to. Like, God has to become a man. Like, there's a mystery, quote unquote, going on there.
Otherwise, we're not special, and wouldn't that be horrible, Mr. Lovecraft?
Yeah, yeah. There's kind of that's a similar belief as in the Cathar religion, where they kind of just don't accept the mortalhood of Christ. They just believe that he was an angel that came down in human form.
Yeah, it's quite there are like problems with that if you're like an actual Christian.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of these arguments tend to get very esoteric.
Yeah.
And I mean literally
Very
esoteric.
much
This
so.
is what the word esoteric was invented to describe.
Yeah, this
And it's going to devolve eventually by the time of the Renaissance. It's going to devolve into arguments about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin and things like that.
That's true.
Yeah, but this. Yeah,
Meanwhile, Martin Luther is saying, "Hey, I actually went and read this book, and I think you should probably be structuring your bureaucracy a little differently, so that maybe some of this insane wealth that you're taking in actually makes its way back to a charity for the people, and not to parties with little naked boys coming out of your cakes."
All that's true, but Martin Luther had.
Which the Pope said, "Screw you, have an excommunication."
He just said,
Yeah.
Essentially, fuck the church.
Yeah, okay, but Martin Luther was
Yeah, we
not
also
just opposing. He did not merely have. He nearly was not opposed to institutional corruption. He had quite severe doctrinal differences with the church.
Yeah.
The doctrine of he opposed the doctrine of works.
The doctrine of indulgences.
Something like that.
Yeah, that was one.
I don't think that counts as a doctrine. That's probably just a practice.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Well, I guess like there's still kind of the element of there's like you can buy the ability to get into heaven.
Yeah. What the issue with that? Well, I don't know, ignoring like the temporal, how like temporally like disreputable that is. Martin Luther's big opposition was that you couldn't do anything to get into heaven at all, which is a big
purely by grace.
Yep.
Yeah,
you had to have faith.
Yeah. Then this is where we get the doctrine of sola scriptura, sola fide, and sola. So I think it's sola gratia, so grace alone. Yeah, faith alone, grace alone, Christ alone, something like, or scripture alone,
Or something like that. And before that, I think the practice was to put a couple of coins either in the dead person's hands or in their mouth so that they could pay the
for Charon.
Yeah, pay the boat.
The fare across the river Styx to get into the underworld.
Yeah, they would put them on their eyes.
Yeah,
that comes from ancient Greece, and that's just like you can chalk up to a cultural practice.
Yeah,
but
it's really interesting to kind of just consider all of these different religions and how like they work together. Since the Catholic Church is kind of in some ways has more in common with something like a polytheistic religion with kind of the cult of saints, I guess.
The Catholic Church has had to do quite a bit of work, sort of like, basically functionally conquering Europe. Which you can have our opinions about that, but
Western Europe, at least.
No, they had to conquer the Roman Empire to do that.
That's not up for. I don't think that's up for debate. Most of that's pretty much a fact.
Yeah,
yeah.
Just the Western Roman Empire. The Easterns had the Orthodox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Eastern Orthodox religion did not like the overabundance of idolatry. They didn't like the use of icons. They said these are graven images.
Iconoclasm was around for a little bit. But the both of those religions are what's called, they're usually what's called classical Christianity or Nicene Christianity, because they come out of the Council of Nicaea, and that's because their basic metaphysics come out of the Council of Nicaea, and their metaphysics sort of are inherited from the Greeks and from Aristotle in particular, and the entire work of the Catholic of both churches, but the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages is to sort of refine this idea until we hit what's called the Thomistic synthesis in Thomas Aquinas, and this is where the full marriage of Aristotelian metaphysics and basically Christian cosmology or mythology in the form of the Summa Theologica, which is it's the masterwork of medieval theological thought.
Something like that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and as to your point about it being like polytheistic, yes, it seems like it can seem, especially to someone who's not really familiar, let's say, with exactly the metaphysics. Yes, it does seem quite polytheistic with praying to the saints and all that kind of stuff, and that's totally true. And if you want to pick a bone about that, that's fine, whatever. But the metaphysics of it.
I don't particularly care. I'm just making an observation.
Yeah, the proverbial you. But you're right. But the point is that the metaphysics of this are quite robust, and it always comes back to sort of like the Aristotelian philosopher's God, which is sort of similar to like the deistic God. And I know you have a point later about this. And there are certain things that are assumed about this, and you actually see something very similar in Hinduism, even though it's technically a polytheistic religion. There's a concept in it, I believe, called Brahman, where it's sort of like this sort of like fundamental reality that all the gods are like drawn from, and this is sort of the same concept. And it's
like with all the gods being manifestations of other gods, who are themselves manifestations of other gods, who are themselves manifestations of this primal cosmic force that turns.
Yeah. It's like the phrase I like to use is it's like the ground of all being, let's say, and it's like. And they're quite good metaphysical arguments about this, because you have to differentiate between existence and non-existence and potency and act and like crazy things that are very esoteric and maybe beyond the scope of this discussion.
You also have to with Brahman, the ultimate point of that is to become one with Brahman. Right. That's the ultimate point where you want to reach an. Yeah, you want to reach
free yourself in the cycle of reincarnation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, eventually you'll hit your final death and you become one with Brahman.
Yeah, you achieve communion with the divine. Is essentially what that is going on there.
Effectively.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of creating a monotheist religion, what are in a fantasy universe, what would be the mechanical things that you would have to do there? I think the main thing is just kind of central deity, he or she, depending on what you really want, what you want to achieve, will essentially just become a figure, usually just a solitary figure of the divine. Usually they have something relating to an angel pantheon, I guess you could say. They have angels of some type serving them, Christianity as saints, even to a certain extent. Mr. Tolkien uses this kind of
imagery.
The Maiar.
Well, he uses this model to basically create roughly subgradients, let's call them, so that way we can interact with the higher powers so that the story can more effectively be told, because you just have
Yeah, and another question is, do you want it to be just a singular god, or do you want there to be a Christ figure as well?
You're kind of like Christianity in the States.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you gotta be, again, you the reason why the Manichaean thing is very pertinent is that you do have to you can discuss your metaphysics in the whole thing, because if you propose a Manichaean quote unquote monotheistic model, that's very different from something like Tolkien, which Tolkien's work is saturated in Catholic theology, basically,
which is also different from the Jewish theology.
Yes.
Alrighty. We're gonna have a bit of a full house, but let me please welcome. Where is that entrance? Here we go.
Oh, hi.
Howdy.
Uh-oh.
And to die!
Oh.
And now he's alive again.
Uh-oh, indeed. We're here with Brent to discuss religion. Holy shit.
Hey.
Hi, Grant. We got a big
welcome.
Sorry about the late entrance. My car troubles.
No worries. Totally fine.
Well, clearly
Totally
I could see
fine.
why you got car troubles. You wrecked it with an
I
explosion.
can't locate my...
You cut off.
What's up?
There it is. There it is. Okay, now we're prepared for everything.
All right. So with a monotheist religion and a fantasy, usually it's kind of just a singular. Yeah, it's just like sometimes there'll be like stuff like an angel or something, or a pantheon of angels where they're just like there's various angels like the
I'll be right back.
Like say Angel Gabriel as an example. Angel Gabriel,
Michael,
Gabriel and Michael,
Uriel, Raphael.
Yeah, and that it's kind of like God. Usually, a God in that vein will kind of delegate his work to a bunch of different people. At least, like that's my observation, because there's the element of you have. They are very powerful usually, but there is at least a kind of an attempt at delegation by said God in order to, like, I guess, like, more personalize things, because sometimes it can be, or, oh man, there's one God, dang, how does he get all this stuff done?
Yeah, I guess even an omnipresent being can't be everywhere at once.
He has too much paperwork, okay? That's what 2020 is happening. He's putting some paperwork in a shredder.
Now, are we talking about in fantasy currently, or are we just talking about the base?
A little bit of both.
So, I'm saying, like, are we setting the groundwork to talk about it as it regards to fantasy, or are we just talking about both in each slide?
I actually don't know. I think that essentially we're kind of mostly kind of saying the groundwork of how to kind of like the function, like the kind of trappings of a monotheist religion.
Right now, we seem to be talking about what I would call cosmology.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I'll just treat it as with regards to both. So, sorry, I even have a frog in my throat. So, when we're talking about monotheism, like even with regards to fantasy, it's also important to consider the watch setter sort of, the watchmaker sort of god. So you can technically have a Go ahead.
The divine clockmaker, you mean?
Yes. So you can have a monotheistic god while still not having any sort of panoply of angels or whatever, because the most base means by which to interpret a monotheistic god is simply that god is the progenitor of all the material of reality. He's the essence. So you can either break it to he created it all, or he has been there through it all, depending on whether whatever. That's a little extra. But there's also the concept of, maybe this is a little too deep. I was going to go into the philosophy of essence. I'll just say you can have a watchmaker versus an active god.
Yeah,
an example of this is actually in Wheel of Time. Wheel of Time is very much a divine clockmaker mechanically, because
hey, Don Nihilus.
What? What?
Nihilus Nihilum.
Oh.
Nihilus.
Their most recent one.
Yeah.
Because he's on vacation. There, thank you. That actually makes sense.
He's been on vacation for what 6,000 years now?
I mean,
man,
well,
that's tremendous union representation. How can I get me some of that?
Technically, the ancient Hebrew translates to era, time period, and it's just shitty translation that's made it come into day.
Well,
yeah, kind of
but...
like the 40 days and 40 nights and all Jewish, like ancient Jewish.
Well, that's translated from Greek. The older shit is from ancient Hebrew.
Yeah, really, really old Hebrew, like missing all the vowels and shit, as well as some of the letters they don't kind of match up with. You can see some similarities between those letters and the modern Hebrew letters, but otherwise you're going to have to pretty much remember which letters mean which, because there is some confusion in there. But
which is why Leviticus is kind of hilarious, because everyone points to it as like, oh, this is why the Bible's evil. But then it's like when you take atheist, modern, ancient Hebrew scholars and they translate that, it's like, no, he's not saying this is evil. It's saying it's unhealthy. Don't fucking eat shellfish because you might get sick. Don't eat pork because they roll around in shit. Don't mix fabrics because whatever they might like.
Yeah, and
it's harder to clean different fabrics.
It's the more
sorry, that's a diversion.
Accurate word. Sorry, the more accurate word isn't evil. It's unclean.
Unclean. Yes.
It's closer to what the original intent was.
Yeah,
right. Leviticus is tangent, and that's my job. But I would like also to get back on the main course.
Yeah, yeah, and that kind of like relates to like how much ritual doctrine you want to put into your world. Like, for instance, in A Song of Ice and Fire, there are multiple religions with a lot of different creeds, though George R. R. Martin's most of where he fleshes that out is the World Book, and he'll only bring it up in the context of the world building when it's pertinent to the plot.
Yeah, it's a little funky considering it's supposed to be the Middle Ages, and it's like one of the most secular Middle Age settings like ever written.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's true.
It's a little, it depends on how you want to view it. It's a little underplayed. I think that one thing that's interesting in this is because this is sort of intimately tied to the nature of evil.
Yes.
In all things, so like if we're going to use the most technical definition of evil, right? It's always hard, right? Like, what is evil? Well, in its most technical form, evil should be defined as what morally should not be, right?
Yes.
What morally should not be is hard to determine, and such is the tragedy of the human condition. But that's what that is. And so, like in a Manichaean system, right, there's some sort of weird parity between good and evil. And of course, Augustine made his bones.
Parity or dichotomy?
Well, the fact
doesn't
that
necessarily have to be a dichotomy.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. In Manichaean, though, it kind of is. Wait, what?
I was gonna argue against that, but if you had a further point, just you go ahead.
Yeah, like in Manichaeanism, like there's sort of like again, like the cosmos is creation, right? The universe is construed as like a battleground between good and evil, right? And that's true,
right.
But again, it's assumed that there's some sort of strange quote unquote parity or dichotomy between the two sides. Whereas in the Christian in the quote unquote Christian teachings, right? This is what Augustine made his bones arguing. Is that no, evil is a rebellion against the divine order, and there is no quote unquote, there's no like quote unquote dichotomy or parity. It's it's always it's a lower thing. Evil's a lower thing, so it's a bit so there's some distinction to be made there.
Right. Now, unless there was anyone else who wanted to go off at that point, please feel free.
Yeah, go for it.
So I was actually going to bring it back to the tangent that I did to make that potentially valuable. So kind of like how we're talking about how like Jews and Catholics and Christians and all that interpret the same or same portions of it differently. That could be an element of your fantasy story. So we don't have to have it be, it's like, this is how it was through all time, or we were Jews and then we were Christians and then we were Muslims or whatever. Like, it's linear. There are different interpretations of the same text throughout history via the political and intellectual climate of the time. So, for example, the Enlightenment could kind of reflect a direct contradiction of Catholic supremacy. So if you wanted to reflect that in your work, what you would do is kind of like derive how this religion has evolved, or been taken control of by political or Pharisees, or like by either like Pharisees, because you could have the Pharisees where they're both political and religious, or the Catholics where they're political and religious while exerting political power over there's a million things you can do. So it doesn't necessarily have to just be, this is the religion, people believe it or they don't believe it. It could be there's evolutions of that particular thing throughout time, and then also in that time period.
And that's the societal relation, how religion relates to society at large.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there are different there are levels to dispute, right? Because like there you can have a metaphysical disagreement, you can have or you can have a doctrinal disagreement.
Yes.
Or just the implications of your religion might be politically inconvenient.
Yes.
You notice you won't hear those mega preachers.
Fuck, I can't fuck my sister if this is what's wrong.
How Jesus said, "Give away all your stuff to the poor."
I think he said tithe. I think he actually said 10%.
Wow,
is the minimum.
Yeah.
But yeah.
We actually have
essentially, that Carl makes a good point. It's not like it doesn't have to directly reflect that. It could be your religion says one thing and your political ambitions say another, and therefore you have a character conflict.
Yep. Mm-hmm. We do have our eighth and final guest. Hopefully. Alrighty.
Good news, we still have budget.
We're going to have more people in this thing than there were Greek gods.
So count. What's your excuse?
Well, we've definitely been fruitful and multiplied.
Car troubles?
Not car trouble,
right.
Trouble.
No, I said, what's your excuse? Did both of your girlfriends have car troubles?
My excuse is my computer. My computer is trying to suppress the truth by making it so that I can't get on.
Technical difficulties.
All day.
Yeah.
I spent like the last several minutes trying to get on here. So I want to take this little thing and smash it on the ground, and it will be down in eternal hell. And by the way, the whole thing about Angel dancing on pins, I suspect that's made up. Like all the stuff I have to say about the medieval church is just made up. Like the whole
the medieval.
You're a little far away from the mic from me, perhaps. Maybe I'm just Mike.
Yeah, he's coming.
Where even is my mic anyway?
That might be an important question.
Like
Never be enough people because.
Oh no!
And along came Susie.
He hurled his
Indeed he did.
thunderbolt.
Yep, that's 99% of all Greek myths. That's how they all start. Zeus. They just start with.
Yep.
No, that's how every Greek myth starts. Zeus happened.
He's feeling himself.
Zeus, the eternal erection.
Well, technically, if you look at it, Poseidon has done more evil things than Zeus, which is surprising.
Yeah.
Oh yes, Ozan Z had he mentioned how the what was it? I'm going through the comments now. Yes. At one hand, it feels like religion was created just to give poor people hope in harsh times, which, of course, brings me back to my boy Karl Marx about how religion is the sigh of the oppressed masses and it is the opiate of the people.
Well,
yeah.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, there
you
is
can't
no.
see me, but I'm rolling my eyes at that.
Well, nothing is easier than to give Christian asceticism a socialist tinge.
It's not an inherently bad argument, but the way Karl Marx argued it was fucking terrible, and the extrapolations he made were terrible. That's my quick summary.
Yeah. Well, let's keep political stuff out of this for now.
Which is why I did that. Yes.
You know, I thought. So how about we bring up some examples in fantasy about monotheistic religions and how they interpret it?
Most the religion, if you call it that, in Lord of the Rings of Eru Iluvatar is basically a monotheistic religion.
It's basically a quote unquote pre-Christian witness monotheism. It's like a pagan roots monotheism, basically.
Now,
then there's Narnia with its lion allegory.
It's basically.
I was going to say I'm not.
Aslan is not an allegory. He's just Jesus.
He's an analogy. He's this is a whole.
He's lion Jesus.
C.S. Lewis has gone on record. Aslan is literally Jesus.
Yeah, he's literally like the divine. Yeah, he's like he's the Logos incarnate in that setting. It's he's literally the divine.
Yeah. He explicitly says to some of the kids when they're about to grow out of Narnia, he says, "I have another name in your world. You must learn to call me by that name."
Yeah, that's a classic one.
Oof.
Which I think is just that's just a cheap way of sidestepping the implications of creating your own theology.
Now
shame on you.
I'm a little disappointed or a little surprised, perhaps, because C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien were friends. So J.R.R. Tolkien, actually, I'm not surprised is the word I would say, because Tolkien hecking hated allegory.
Yeah, cordially disliked it in
he
every
specifically
form.
hated that people kept trying to draw allegories from his stories. Like, no,
but the ring is
its own thing. Leave me alone. And then C.S. Lewis, his best friend, comes along and says, "No, it is an allegory." You will accept this.
Now that I'm unmuted, for some reason I got muted. I'm not sure how. We're not quite done with Tolkien yet. One really weird thing is, I mean, the concept, of Iluvatar and all that. Yes, that's fine. That makes sense. But what's really weird is how secular the hobbits are. They're supposedly rustic too, but they're culturally they're basically suburban, they're not very rustic, and they have no religion apparently.
There is no religion in Lord of the Rings. Period.
Yeah, religious practice.
I'm talking about the hobbits.
Yeah. Oh yeah, both. There is no religion, and
there's no ritual in Lord of the Rings.
There is only what exists.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few references to religion, cultus, in the sense of cultus, that you're using in the sense of cultus. There are a couple of references in some of the writings about Numenor that the king would have. There were a couple of rituals, like twice a year. A Thanksgiving was one of them, and I forget what the other one was. But
there's no.
By and large, no. That's kind of weird. There aren't temples. Where there are, they're usually like evil.
Yeah,
and they're devoted to worshiping Morgoth.
Yeah.
So that's sort of odd.
Yeah, the most you get in Tolkien is usually like references like burial practices. Usually that's the most like common thing, but of course it is.
Yeah.
But like in Tolkien, it's like it's sort of like it's a mythic structure. So this quote unquote sides are just kind of like assumed, and you're just on one side or the other side. And again, you can have let's call them political or cultural or sociocultural disputes with other people on your nominal side, but there's nothing like doctrinal to dispute in the setting.
Yes. I suppose the way you could phrase that is in Lord of the Rings, it's less so that it's a religion, more so that it's just history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's literally a myth, right? It's understood to be, I think religion as a word didn't come about for like a long time.
Well, yes, but it's more than that. What they say, legend became myth. So basically, they're not just missing that those ancient beings or that those ancient battles occurred. It's more so just that they don't know. Because Tolkien was a philosopher, was a historian, so he's kind of alluding to that in his mind, perhaps, or at least in this universe, that them becoming I hate your falchion logo there. Why do you have a falchion? But he's basically alluding to that all religion might be history, and it's only our lack of ability to remember that might be the thing that makes it become a doubtable. That's not a word.
Well, yeah. I mean, the word.
Do you mean the mythology has a grain of truth somewhere concept?
Well, yes. It's only that
in a world, I think it's just true.
Well, the word mythology it didn't always mean what we kind of like associate with it, because now we say mythology is like a myth is fake, right?
Mythology is not true.
Yeah, a myth used to be like the founding story of a culture, right? It was like the sort of like the
concept.
or whatever. Like culture using the most general word. Yeah, it's like the founding. It's like the baseline, right? So you say like what's like the founding, like the Mesopotamian myth, right? Like that story informs the society of like the essential truth. Yeah, I think it does look more like a bill. Anyway, it's sort of like a form of the essential paradigm of being for the society and how it should operate, et cetera, et cetera. And we can quibble whether we're watching like Superman, like Marvel superheroes when we talk about mythology, or we can like look at more like the symbolic aspects of like eyes and word and truth and things like that, which is usually more interesting.
Yep. I'm looking up at the word right now. It's myth is derived from the ancient Greek mythos, which is something said, a word, a public speech, talk and conversation, a proverb, the talk of men, or any tale or legend, or the plot of a tragedy or comedy.
But we still use the word mythos too.
Yes. Yeah. Well, because what he's saying there is that it has translated from an ancient oral history into just simply the act of telling a story.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. We've let ourselves think it means fake. It doesn't quite mean fake. It means essential.
Yeah. It is about the speech. It also may be related to the Proto-Slavic mysl, which is an idea or a thought, or possibly derived from an Egyptian word meaning a word, speech, affair.
Yeah, makes sense.
General.
Yeah, and of course.
Yeah, she is.
Aphrodite is a crazy person.
So this might be the craziest.
What was that?
This was in doubt. The only
Aphrodite has the craziest origin story, maybe.
Oh
yeah.
I guess maybe I'm not aware. Tell me.
She is either the sperm of Zeus that fell into the ocean, or she's the sperm of Kronos or Uranus, whichever one it is. That when he was castrated, he fell into the ocean.
I'm hoping you said spurn and not sperm.
No, sperm. Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Uranus.
It's like, why am I not shocked at all? That's an origin story that literally just was formed from sperm falling into the ocean.
Yeah, well, it's very
Because-
that's how we all got
Greek myth is very visceral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sexual.
How was the Minotaur created? The wife of Minos fucked a bull. There.
Yes.
Okay, we've all been there.
Yeah.
Is there something you'd like to tell us?
Yeah,
Would you like to take a seat over there in the corner?
Brett,
I said a bull, not a calf. How dare you?
Brett, listen.
There's
Do we
hope.
talk about your attraction to bulls or something?
There's hope. There's hope for you.
Yeah, because the Greeks imagine, not imagine, but the Greeks formulated their deities as sort of like merely super beings and what's occasionally called cosmic superpowers.
The Greekiest Greeks to ever Greek, basically.
Yeah. Well, let me go.
I think we're done with monotheism.
Yeah, we're going into the more polytheism.
Yeah, we're getting into polytheism now. You may as well.
Yeah,
move on.
polytheism is way more. Polytheism is way more interesting to talk about than
it is.
Because monotheism usually it's just the best you can really get is usually you either get divine clockmaker or you get the god who is basically orchestrating the plot. With polytheists, there can be some more interesting stuff done.
Monotheism is more interesting in its metaphysics, I would say, but polytheism is better for stories. It just is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, what the divine clockmaker thing? That's boring. I want to read about the world that is the dead body of a being that was killed by this other god, and they cut him into pieces and made the 9 realms out of him.
I'm gonna go ahead and disagree with you. I think that they're both interesting in their own ways, with regard to the themes that they each can explore. So the divine clockmaker could easily explore themes such as existentialism, in a certain way. Whereas, for example, a polytheist culture, like for example the Greek culture, could easily explore existentialism and it's oh God, everything that made everything is made by horny assholes.
Is that necessarily something to be sad about?
No. They are both interesting in their own ways. We don't have to say one is necessarily better than the other. It's just better for the story we're trying to tell.
This is why Elder Scrolls is the best setting because it has all this.
Hang on, now you stop right there.
Yeah, you need some kind of metaphysics, even if you have polytheism. There has to be something ultimate beyond it all.
Yeah, this is what I was referring to earlier with the Brahman concept. Because even in Hinduism, they have this sort of ground of being concept.
And you can combine polytheism and you can have some like Tolkien does with the Valar. He's got the Valar like the gods, but then there's God beyond the gods. So
they're subgradients, right?
Yeah.
They're all aspects of one, or it could be that they're all aspects of one god and they are just worshipped differently.
Yes, like the seven in Song of Ice and Fire. The seven.
Yeah. I really like this point, obviously, because I think it is true because it's more natural. Like the point we're making about ground of being and monotheism and all that kind of stuff. That is pretty esoteric, as we said before. But the fact that there are divine super beings that embody fundamental concepts that we engage in our daily lives, that's obvious. That's kind of obvious, right?
Yeah, it's easier to discern what each thing represents rather than, like you said, making it esoteric and being something that you have to almost be a philosopher to understand, unless it's very borne out by the subject matter, like with what's his name? The dude got burnt in Fallout New Vegas.
Oh, Joshua Graham?
Yes. But even that's an already pre-established thing. So I guess what you could be saying, what I might be saying, is that the more esoteric you make the language of your film or your story, the more difficult it is to actually get the themes across to a general audience what you're actually trying to express.
Indeed, and it's less visceral also, which is always a little tricky because how am I going to describe the ground of being, right? If this pure white light, I guess, that undergirds the what am I saying? By contrast, if you have the god of thunder, and it's this dude, and he's slinging thunder, it's awesome, right?
We all know what thunder is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so what I think is really interesting to talk about here is the way certain things are broken up. I'm sorry for your trouble, Curmudgeon. So like you brought up the 7, right? From Song of Ice and Fire. And what he does with the 7 is actually really interesting. I don't know that it's ever been done before. Or I've never really seen it, but he breaks up the 7 in terms of the gods are purely human endeavor, aspects of human endeavor, right? Mm-hmm. There is no god of lightning or like the sea or whatever.
Oh, yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's actually really cool. I actually really like the 7 in that respect.
Yeah, I like it now too.
Yes. Yeah.
Then again, are 7 also described as, part of the same whole?
Yeah, that's going back to the fundamental thing. Yeah.
Basically, it's very much fantasy Catholicism, or at least George R. R. Martin's take on Catholicism.
Yeah, it's the one God in 7 parts concept. It is actually a form of monotheism, but breaking it up, it sort of like encompasses human endeavor in a way that for the people understand. I would say.
Dude, you're making me like this story even more, even though the fucking show's garbage now.
I think A Song of Ice and Fire is very
really interesting. I always just considered it a polytheistic religion, but you're telling me that it's kind of a extension of the Trinity into 7.
It's
what the fuck? That's so cool.
Yeah, it's in the book. It's in the book. It's funny. It's pretty interesting how he does it in the book. So he has that concept explored in a Catelyn chapter because she's fun. She's pretty devout. And she has it. This is really cool. She like ruminates on this whole concept right before the scene where she talks to Renly for the last time, and Renly is killed by the Shadow Assassin. Which is an incredibly good. It's incredibly good.
Brienne has this, or who had this?
This is a Catelyn chapter.
Catelyn, okay.
Yeah, it's a Catelyn chapter. It's the chapter where before Renly is killed.
Yeah.
Spoiler.
Yeah. Hey, done.
She spends all night.
Nihilum again.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll call my
pagan.
I'd call my 7F pagan.
Nope. The one above it.
It's because we know.
Look, because they are part of
the one.
Done.
I know.
No, not that one.
Down.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep, that one.
I like so to be a Neph pagan, please.
More like Neph Texan.
Yeah.
Still sign up for that.
Come back to me. I can do better.
Well, the season is very much a pagan observance.
Oh, Neph pagan.
Yeah.
You have a religion, Neph.
I can't believe my name is so. I can't believe. Yeah, I never imagined it would be this memeable, but
it's a good name. I mean, Nephilim is a powerful concept in storytelling, really.
Yeah,
it's
half angel, half human.
Yeah, as to like the point about like why there's so many the sort of the preeminence of monotheistic thinking in our society, ignoring the Christian concept. This, like what I was talking about before with like God is the ground of being and that kind of thing, like for like the ultimate power, right? I don't want to get too real life, but this is what like that first commandment in the Bible started getting at. Like you're not supposed to take things that are not the supreme power of the universe and make it the supreme power of the universe. You're just not supposed to do that. Yeah, that's sort of like what that commandment is getting at.
I am.
Yeah, that's sort of the cryptic I am. Yeah. So what you'll hear sometimes is like God is. You'll just hear that phrase, and that's sort of like what that's getting at. And
well, if being of beings, yeah.
But in terms of Martin again, one of the things that's kind of weird is that there don't seem to be a lot of doctrinal. The only doctrinal debate that's ever mentioned in the histories is the bit about exceptionalism and whether it's okay for the Targaryens to sleep with their brothers or not.
Oh boy!
And no one seems to argue about how these 7 relate to each other. Whereas in Christianity, you've got all sorts of, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. How do they relate?
Yeah, that's why I kind of
expect there.
It's very much
a lot more.
So your point is, how metaphysical are you trying to get?
He doesn't get into that kind of thing. I don't think he's interested in that kind of thing. He's mainly interested.
I'm not saying him. I'm saying your point is that the spectrum in that regard is how metaphysical are you trying to get? How closely are you trying to relate this religious concept to the real world, as opposed to being in a philosophical context?
Yeah, but in terms of I'm actually talking about how GRRM himself, how he's using it.
Yeah. The religion in Martin's setting is a little thin. It allows for some interesting things, but it's a little thin.
Yeah, it's pretty good, but it's not perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's more of like set dressing, I think, is the best way of putting it.
Yeah, we're not really meant to, really dig into the, the individual philosophical underpinnings of each aspect of the religion so much as we are just to see how it interacts with the world
and how it affects the characters.
Well, you can see it a little bit.
Yeah,
that all
affects more. Yeah,
that all depends on how deep you want to go into that as an element of the world itself. Is that you want it to be more so, if you want it to simply be some sort of element of, I can't remember what I was going with that. Basically, if you want the gods to be some sort of like small element, that's a complicated question. I'll summarize it, I guess, by saying it's about what you want them to mean. It doesn't have to be one thing or the other. It's about what you need them to be within the context of the universe, within the context of the story.
Yeah, I mean, everything ultimately is a storytelling device, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Story always comes first.
Yeah, and there's not much philosophy in the Song of Ice and Fire books either. People don't seem to.
Well, yes, but it's not about what happens in Song of Ice and Fire. It's what happens in your story.
Yeah. I'm gonna come out and say right here, I have a church in my book, and I have absolutely no plans to give it any sort of doctrine. It is just a political body, and very much an arm of the state.
Well, what you see in a lot of society, so there's this concept called the single story state and the two story state, and this goes back in history. What you see a lot of the times, what you see in most societies is you see that the myths that undergird the culture have to be functionally merged with the state or even co-opted with the state in some way in order to sort of make the society function properly. And there are ways in which this can be good. There are ways in which this can be more good or more bad, right? What you see kind of uniquely in the medieval world is you see two-story, what's called a two-story state, which is you have the secular authorities, right, the kings, which are basically the inheritors of Rome, and you have the religious story, which is the Catholic Church, and you see them at you can see them at loggerheads quite a bit, and like everyone like talks about how the Catholic Church buoyed up monarchy and whatever. No, the Christian doctrine says you must obey the social order, but that does not mean the social order can just do anything it wants.
Render to Caesar what is due unto Caesar.
Yes, and so what you get in the Middle Ages is a tension between the two things competing for the society, and while that can be bad, it also can be quite good because, the Catholic Church, like, there have been few things in history as effective a check on secular authority as the medieval Catholic Church. That's just true. And you don't see a breakdown until
can you explain that a little further?
Like the fact that the church, right? And again, I don't want to get too historical, right?
Yeah.
But the church could, like, the fact that there was a church that could effectively condemn or censor kings. And you can sit there and say, well, that's the church usurping power, but that does not change the fact that it's a check on secular power.
Yes.
There is no god kings in the world. There are no god kings, and that's a big deal. There's a separation, and just having that separation gives the society flex, so that way you don't immediately begin to cavort. A deviation from one story to the other doesn't create a massive explosion of rebellion, let's call it, because because you can move from one story to the other as suitable. By contrast, if you only have one story, if you begin to be informed about other stories, let's say, well, then you have to break the whole system because you have only the one story to reference.
Yeah.
So it's there's that's kind of how that goes.
Interesting.
That's an interesting concept. I'd have to think about that more before I actually.
Yeah.
What was that? What was it called again?
The single story state and the single story state and the two story state, or the multi-story state.
Single story state. And I think there was some. Wasn't there something before that, like a technical term?
I mentioned the mythos, the government co-opting the religious apparatus. Maybe that's what you heard.
The two swords, the secular sword and the spiritual sword.
So in terms of getting back to kind of how this relates to writing, in terms of function, a polytheist religion you can do a few more interesting things with. Like this actually was a good point brought up in chat, that the like the Discworld gods kind of play with humanity, using them as pieces, and that could be an interesting thing. It's also the case in the book series about the Elenium and the Tumuli, where like gods use like people as pieces and kind of use them for their own purposes.
Yeah, that's something in like in like all sorts of things. Elder Scrolls, Warhammer, all these kind of things.
These are part.
One thing that I don't see in your slides, maybe you do have it later, is you do not have ancestor worship.
Now,
I put philosophy in there as like Buddha, but I forgot to put in ancestor worship.
Yeah. Now I don't inherently agree. Go ahead.
I guess that could be a section of polytheism. So you could count it under polytheism. Assuming
I just wanted to make sure we covered it.
Veneration.
Yeah.
So now, go ahead.
Oh, I actually like I find ancestor worship kind of really interesting, because I actually created an ancestor religion in my Dragonlord books, where it's basically like they're essentially the most powerful like
beings.
They're the most powerful. So entities. They're like not necessarily like entities, but basically because they are able to ride dragons, and it's part of the fact that they are semi-divine, or at least like they're semi-inhuman. They are able to. They kind of just worship it. They just kind of venerate their ancestors and just say there are no gods but us.
Yeah, the elves in Elder Scrolls, especially the High Elves, believe that their original ancestors were divine. They were higher, and over the centuries, they basically devolved, and this informs a lot of what goes on in the setting.
Yeah, well, all this is to say essentially just that any concept you take, you can spread it in any other way. So you don't necessarily have to be the Chinese sense of ancestor worship. You could be the self-venerating idea of ancestor worship. Go ahead. That heard someone trying to. No. Go ahead.
Keep going.
The other, well, that was all I wanted to say about that. So, I guess I can further extrapolate on that just simply by saying, take any concept, turn it on its head or turn it on its arms, and it's going to provide you a whole new slew of storytelling options. So you don't have to like put it in the way that you've already seen it. Take a concept, turn it in a different way, and it's like, okay, that's where that's going to go. Now, the other thing I wanted to say that I didn't want to like interrupt or disrupt a flow was when Dunn was talking about how, or was it Dunn? Yeah. Whatever. Someone mentioned how a monotheist culture or religion in a story inherently has some sort of less storytelling device. I think the concept there, what it usually boils down to in philosophy, is God's whim. And I think you can have God's whim in monotheist or polytheist religions. It just depends on how you want to do it. So not only can you turn a pre-existing philosophy on its head, you could turn an element of philosophy on its head and say, yeah, no, like we already even have the concept of God's whim, even without horny, sexy gods that turn into gooses to fuck women. You can have that even in like a monotheist or a polytheist or a clockworker or a non-god existent thing, or even the Buddhists. Just turn that concept on its head, and we inherently have a different interpretation that opens up all these storytelling options.
Yeah, I mean, you can just say that, even more generally, like, reality can't do just anything you want, right? Like, you're sort of, like, constrained. And eventually, if you do something that's ridiculous, quote unquote, eventually reality, like, snap back at you. And you can say that you can, if we just sort of the clockmaker, right? Or just just do totally no God, right? Well, reality still has constraints on it, seemingly, that you have to, reconcile with.
Well, there's the concept.
Wait, what?
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just they seem arbitrary, so they seem they're whim in that sense, but they're there, and you have to deal with them.
Yeah. So all these elements is, I guess, the summary could be all these elements don't necessarily have to be applied in the way that they are in reality. Apply them in a way that is either interesting or relevant to the story, or both. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully both is good.
Or the story could revolve around the negation of these ideas or the usurpation of them.
Yeah. There's also kind of the element of if God's on your side, like what is like the tension, I guess. I think that usually, like, because a lot of stories seem to be man versus God in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Where it's Destiny, where I know that, like, in what is it, the Millennium, both cases it's a God versus man situation with gods on both sides helping out.
Yeah.
And
I think the tension. No, go ahead.
Oh no, go for it.
Well, no, I suspect that and I apologize if I'm talking too much, but I suspect that one source of tension is sort of the existential tension. Like, yeah, okay, sure, the supreme creator of the universe is gonna win in the end, duh. But that's, what about you? What are you? How are you gonna reconcile with these problems?
Yeah. Well, there's another existential problem. If God actually is all powerful and God actually cares about our actions, why does He care about me performing those things?
Well, there are, like, there are suggestions about that.
Yeah.
And that, of course, brings it back to religion's relationship with the individual.
Yes.
Yeah.
What is your motivation for manifesting your worship or your whatever?
And the individual, of course, being the character. The characters.
Yeah. I think that if we want to talk about more, if we want to cover, more like storytelling mechanics, we can revisit in a polytheistic pantheon. We can revisit the nature of the gods. Let's say like I mentioned before, the 7 are aspects of human endeavor, but they're also polytheistic religions where gods are natural concepts, right? And there are aspects where they're like mix and match. So I think we can explore that a little bit because
where, like, each religion, like, God is related to an aspect of humanity or the natural world.
Yeah.
Where Norse mythology, Freya is basically Aphrodite, just less psycho.
The Norse gods.
Thor is aimed more restrained Zeus, I think.
Sexually restrained version of Zeus. He ain't restrained in other aspects.
Yeah, he has more self-control.
He has anger management. He's got anger management problems rather than sexual management problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's kind of interesting, right? Like, Thor represents thunder, but Tyr represents war. So you have a, all the gods don't represent. Some gods represent natural concepts, and some gods represent aspects of human society, right?
Yeah.
And it's also interesting to tie this into the sociological point again. It's interesting to see sort of where we're found where certain founding stories sort of like the presuppositions in founding stories themselves carry huge implications, right? I've been watching Donald Kagan's Yale series about ancient Greece, and a point he makes that is really good is if we take the Iliad as the basic founding document, quote unquote, of ancient Greece, right? It begins in a war, right? It doesn't begin with like the creation universe and all that fun stuff. It's a war, which means there are polities. What?
Oh, sorry.
No. Okay, no. So there are presuppositions baked into that story. There are polities. There are kingdoms. There are factions. You have martial duties. All of these are just baked right into the story, and they presuppose things. Like the Greeks believed. The reason why the Greeks called the barbarians and it wasn't just because they sounded funny. It's because they did not live in a polis. The free man lives in a polis, in a certain type of society.
Well, that name did come because they sounded funny.
Well, yes, the name.
Yeah, because all their strange, funny foreign languages, they just sound like bar.
It's hilarious.
Go ahead, though.
Yeah.
No, but that's exactly it. So you see in like the founding myth that is the Iliad, all these implications, all these presuppositions that inform the culture. And that's sort of, that's always one, that's always interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go too far into this one because I had a different objection. Is the Iliad the founding, or is it more of a fundamental element of Greek culture?
It's not that it's so much that it's like the founding myth. I'm not necessarily saying that. It's not the creation
central myth.
It's not the creation story, but it's sort of like it's sort of like the fundamental framing of their whole society.
Yeah, I've seen it referred to as basically their Bible. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was treated like their Bible. Alexander the Great famously slept with it under his pillow.
Yeah.
It's great. I was
just trying to get some clarification on that.
No, yeah.
The objection that I had was I can't remember whom did it or by whom it was said that someone was saying that Zeus is the god of thunder. I feel like that's kind of oversimplifying his role because it's not that he's the god of thunder.
Well, like Thor. Thor is the god of thunder. I think it was relating to Thor, like as they're both Thor and Zeus are very similar in terms of like they're both thunder gods, but they have different faults and falls.
Zeus is more of a god of the heavens.
They have the same dominion in the natural world, but their place in the structure, in the order of like in the hierarchy of the universe, let's say, is different.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to, is that the natural elements is only what's the opposite of a personification? Anti-personification of who that culture would think would control that. So for the Greeks, I guess they thought it'd be a horny god who fucks everyone and is in control of everything. For the Norse, I guess I don't know much about Thor, but maybe passionate child of the real god. So however you want to define your thunder god per se, with regards to your world and with regards to the rest of the mythos, you have to understand within your world, what do your people consider something worthy of wielding thunder, which is to them potentially the most terrifying thing. And if it's for example, Japanese culture, perhaps tsunamis or hurricanes are actually the most terrifying thing. So for the Greeks, it would be lightning. For another culture, maybe it's wind or thunder, or it's wind or water.
Yeah.
Hence Poseidon.
Yes, there you go. But Poseidon is not the most terrifying. He's under Zeus because lightning to them is more terrifying, and thus commands more respect.
Yeah, they just don't like. They don't like the sea very much. Who's echoing?
Fuck the sea. Said.
Hopefully not me.
Not me, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm hearing a bad echo, and
I mean, it's obvious. Kind of.
Is it echo? Because my girlfriend's making cookies over there. So do you hear like just a scrape or actual people talking?
I think it's a scrape. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will mute myself when I'm not talking.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, that was it.
Basically, yeah.
So yeah, we talked about that.
Well, all that is to say is that the god should be a reflection of the people, and the people a reflection of their gods. Obviously, just Gesamtkunstwerk storytelling in general.
What about what was it? Taking a couple of quote unquote mortal beings and lifting them up to become gods of a new religion.
Okay, so that's called.
That's technically the origin of Asclepius. Since he was a demigod, but then he became the god.
Well, it could also just be called ascension.
Yeah, that's usually called apotheosis.
Yes, classically.
And that's that's a concept like you see it like a lot. Like you see that in Greek, you see that in again in Elder Scrolls. Elder Scrolls is just great. Elder Scrolls is just a great resource for this. Talos in Elder Scrolls was a mortal man who became so good he became a god.
That's also Sigmar's origins from Warhammer Fantasy.
Yes,
he was a god. He's not the god king, but he was very much immortal.
Exactly. You can make the same case about the Emperor in Warhammer 40k. He's achieving.
He's godlike, but he's not a god.
He's like achieving apotheosis, basically, though. Like he's like his current like state on the Golden Throne is him like, he's like in the middle of it, and he's trying desperately not to do it because then everyone would like die.
Yeah, it's mostly because people think that there's a theory around that he's a perpetual. He's technically immortal, but not immortal.
Yeah,
like he'll die, but then he'll come back, like say a couple hundred years.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And there's I want to bring this up during the monotheistic one, but it's a bit too late to that. That'd be kind of we're probably extending a godlike. I would say the Green Knight for Bretonia. There's like the original. I would say that there are some thoughts that the Green Knight is Gila Breton. He's technically like Jesus in himself, and his god is Lady the Lake.
Yeah, so apotheosis very literally means literally to deify, and it usually when we kind of like say you achieve like the best form of yourself, let's say. Right, like,
you transcend humanity and achieve a galaxy-sized brain.
One of the Roman emperors, while he was dying, is said to have said, "I feel like I'm turning into a god."
I mean, if anyone, it was probably Nero or Caligula. But deification of the Roman emperor was common. There was the cult of the emperor.
Yeah.
This is this was a big thing, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my cultures has that. They're called shoguns, and the emperors claim to have created the world and all that. They're kind of the bad guys. For example. Yeah, they're kind of the bad guys.
Yeah. Well, now that kind of.
It was Vespasian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep,
Vespasian. Okay, cool.
That kind of goes back.
Apparently, the point behind his statement, "Vai puto Deus fio, dear me, I think I'm becoming a god," is he didn't really approve of the whole idea of the Roman cult of the emperor, but because the state was so fixated around it at the time, nobody would let him abolish the cult. So it was basically oh man,
he was just digging at him. He was like, "Fuck it."
Yeah.
Yeah, Rome has been compared to a totalitarian society. There was an historian, Peter Heather, who's even after Christianity was kind of like this thing where where the senators would say several times, "You have they'd say all this wonderful stuff about the emperor is wonderful." They have to say like several times, have to shout it, kind of like almost like Stalinistic thing.
I mean,
it was a cult of personality. Yeah.
You're talking about the Roman Empire, which became a toll booth the kingdom. I mean,
the Roman Empire, the Roman Republic, and the Roman Empire, like, was just. I mean, like the idea that like political forms guarantee like the way your society functions. Like Rome was a republic, and it was one of the most brutal societies ever.
Yeah, gladiator arenas say hello.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, very few of the gladiators actually died.
Yeah, the gladiators are like the least.
They were much too valuable.
Yeah. The gladiators were like the least problematic thing. The Romans would just if the Romans thought that your tribe was causing too much trouble, they just genocide you. Straight up.
Yeah, they did.
Like they moved beyond Hadrian's Wall in Britain, and they just murdered the tribes.
Some people think the Middle Ages were a decline from the Rome, and I kind of have to raise an eyebrow or two at that.
It depends what you mean. It depends on what you mean.
Technologically, it was a decline, but other than that, yeah.
There was a brief time.
Culturally, potentially, yes, I say you would agree it's decline. But if you're talking about the long stroke of what occurred as a result of that quote-unquote decline, perhaps it is better.
No, there was a whole second agricultural revolution. We have the flowering of very robust and metaphysical thinking.
The medieval communes.
Wait, what?
The medieval communes.
Sure.
The communes, yes.
There's a time between the fall of Rome and like the 476, I think, and basically like roughly around 1000 AD. That period is that's like the true Dark Ages. That is like one of the worst periods in history. But after like 1000, like you see like just a feudal society. Like you see a pretty straightforward society. It's harsh, but even societies are harsh.
Okay, I would say feudalism is. I don't know what argument you could make for feudalism that makes it better than ancient Roman society.
Well, I can actually make a few good arguments. Okay, so the big problem, the huge problem with, and I apologize if this is not pertinent to the stream, but I'm compelled to do this. So the huge problem with what eventually happened with the Roman army was that the Roman army became a professional soldier class. And that means that they were untied to the land. And while originally this
is a good thing.
No. Here's the problem. What happened was that eventually, when you can maintain political virtue, let's say, that's not such a bad thing. But if you let political virtue decline, what you have is a warrior class that is not bound to anything like concrete. You just have a roving band of murder men. And what they eventually
don't have a war going on at the time. Well,
yeah. Exactly. What eventually happened was
they're basically the military-industrial complex.
I mean, in a way, you can say that because eventually what happened was there are the famous barracks emperors, and you just had the soldiers murdering and replacing emperors as they see fit, because emperor means imperator, right? And that was the commander of the army, and so you just had the soldier class just making the emperor. By contrast, in feudalism, whatever we think of it. The knight, the feudal knight, he's tied to a society. He has an oath. He has a land that he has to protect.
Yeah, fair enough.
There's something there.
What's that famous? Go ahead. I thought you were done.
Famous what?
I'm sorry.
Well, I thought he was done. I don't want to interrupt.
No, I was done.
What's that famous saying? A standing army is like an erection, and that. Its presence of always being there invites chaos.
That's hilarious.
Phrasing.
Let me look it up.
Let
me look it up. An army is
like an erection.
Well, he's looking that up. The eyeglasses were invented in the Middle Ages, so the fact that I'm able to use this computer screen at all and see things on it is thanks to someone in the Middle Ages.
Great.
A standing army is like an erection.
A standing army? Okay. A standing army is one that is... Okay, what? Oh. Yeah, a standing army is like...
Yeah.
A standing member, yes. It's like a standing member.
Yeah, I think...
yes.
Let's go back to Rome.
The standing army is like a standing member. It's an excellent assurance of domestic
We're
tranquility.
talking too much about Rome and not the gods themselves. They stole the Greeks. Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
Finish talking about penises.
Rome pretty much like stole most of its culture from other places.
It was copy pasta of the empire.
Yes, but you see in Rome an interesting
appropriators. They were the original cultural appropriators.
I will never forgive them for what they will never forgive them because now I can't. Most people say Hercules instead of Heracles, which is his original Greek name.
But it's interesting.
Hercules
right?
sounds better.
Hercules
sounds better.
Also probably
Hercules is more accurate.
It sounds worse.
Aesthetics, bro.
It's also probably just because that's what you've heard since you were young.
Yeah, it's just Hercules just flows off the tongue better than Heracles.
That's
Heracles.
But we're not saying what the Greeks did anyway.
As to the issue of like the gods, right? Because we're in theory talking about this. It is interesting to see, like with the reappropriation, the reorientation of the values a little bit, right? Because in the Roman model, Mars becomes one of the most important gods. Mars is the source of the word martial. It's the etymological root of that word. It's why whenever you hear Martian and like we have Martian invaders, that's actually etymologically very sophisticated as a concept. So you see a reorientation of what is important, even with the reappropriation.
Well, to be fair, the concept of a Martian invader came along a lot later, only in the early 20th century, when they thought there might actually be life on the red planet.
Yes, but that doesn't make it cool.
So that could be in part because it's the nearest planet, but also could be in part because they're like, why not Mars? It's derivative of
Actually,
Mars.
Venus is the nearest planet, which is why we sent more space probes to it earlier in the space program era before we realized it was basically hell.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
One step.
Yeah, but the Greeks didn't much like Ares. The Ares is the Greek equivalent of Mars, but in Greece he wasn't terribly popular. They even kind of made fun of him.
No, he wasn't. Ares is not. I'm sorry.
He's not unpopular. He's just extremely hated.
Yeah, they like to make fun of him.
Only Aphrodite liked him, and she bones anything on him. So take that as you will.
Yeah, I can only think of two myths about him, and both of them put him in a ridiculous light.
But in Roman context, right, Mars becomes like the guard. He not only becomes associated with agriculture a little bit. He also becomes the guardian of the people. He becomes a guardian of the Roman society. He becomes a very important figure.
Interesting.
Yeah, and usually like with polytheism, it's usually like there are multiple demigods related to relating to the current state of affairs, where you have this like these gods that can say, all right, here we have this person who has a divine because of like their DNA, and it kind of creates an easy method of like storytelling.
Yeah. I apologize, but the echo is still there.
That's me, sorry.
Yeah, this is very much kind of the kind of, you can do a number of interesting things. You can have like kind of the chess player type gods. You can have the gods that are directly like even warring pantheons, like the Vanir, the Vanir and the Aesir, where they're two warring god tribes almost, and they're trying to like initially like they're just warring with each other, but then eventually they become like one singular tribe of gods. It's by intermarrying with each other.
Yeah.
I think an interesting one's the Tuatha De Danann from Celtic mythology.
Yeah, the fairy people.
Their orders that they are raiders from another land. They came to the land itself, then they burnt their ship so they could never leave. Essentially, they're superhumans, which is just their god, but
it's kind of the. I think that's also been used in a number of other places, like what is it? The I think like it's. I think actually that's very interesting. I think that's probably where George R. R. Martin might have gotten his idea for Nymeria, because she burns her own ships.
That's a recurring motif in lots of stories of the burning of ships. I believe it happens in at least. I think it happens somewhere in the Trojan War.
burns the ships at Loscar.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cortez burned the ships when he arrived in Mexico.
Yeah, I heard of it. Yeah. Yeah, there are a few stories like that. It's a recurring concept. The point of no return.
Yeah, the Tuatha De Danann were, I guess, lightly euhemerized because they were started out as being gods, and then they turned into kind of another invading force in the Book of Invasions. So they turned it into like a pseudo-history, from mythology into kind of a pseudo-history. Because it was written down, by the time it was written down, that Ireland had been Christian for several centuries.
I think I've got a nugget here. So I think what we can call this is essentially that polytheism, particularly in literature and history, tends to be the personification of the zeitgeist of that time, and that can change throughout time, obviously, because the zeitgeist refers to the current state of affairs. Whereas with monotheism, it tends to be an attempt to granulate what it means to be human into abstract concepts rather than a personified concept. Both of which are viable, and you can switch those around as you want, but that tends to be what we see in literature and history.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's something there. Have we discussed this topic ad infinitum?
I think that we have.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Already.
Perhaps
Yeah,
ad nauseum.
Yeah. Then we have philosophical/atheist religion. So I put the Jedi up there, even though like Jedi technically are not a religion.
It fits. It does.
Yeah.
Jedi are cops.
Yeah.
They're space cops.
With this Carl, I cannot let you have those death sticks, so shut up.
You want to buy some death sticks? You want to go home? You want to go home?
You do not want to sell me death sticks.
You want to go? I don't want to sell you death sticks. You want to go home and rethink your life? I want to go home and rethink my life.
I think that is one of the best lines to ever come out of the prequels.
Yeah,
it's a generally funny scene.
Really funny,
or genuinely funny, rather. Excuse me.
Great rage builds us up.
So what we're sort of like describing here is, to return to like the concept is like metaphysically we're talking about this sort of there's sort of this fundamental reality, and we're dealing with it, right? Although in this case it's very distinctly non-personal. Let's say, to put a word on it, it's there's no like quote unquote dictates from like a thing.
Nothing personal, kid.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So the Force is that kind of pantheistic, maybe?
Maybe.
The
Pantheistic in what way?
Well, you see, it's hard for me to say because I'm like 4 decades behind in Star Wars. so
I wouldn't call the Force pantheistic. I don't think that is quite accurate. It's not nature.
It's more like a god, but an impersonal god.
It is a non.
I would say it's a force of nature.
It is the way. If you don't know Tao, then you don't know the way.
It's a
the
metaphysical.
way that can be spoken of is not the truth.
I'd say it's close
Only
to a
the
force of nature.
unnameable is eternally real.
It's like Yoda says, it's a thing that binds us. Now, it doesn't inherently require it to have any sort of will. It's just that it is a thing that flows throughout both the universe, every rock, every metaphysical elements, gravity, magnetism, humanity, whatever you want to define all those things as. a thing that just flows through all of those things. It's just an encompassing river that not even encompassing. It doesn't encompass them. It is in all of them.
It saturates them. It is effectively. It is function. You know, like the most correct term for the Force is that it is some sort of strange phenomenon. Yes. It's a metaphysical phenomenon that like these people who are like attuned, whatever that means, to it can like manipulate or like use to produce certain to manipulate reality.
So
this is actually something that I find a very potential source of a lot of socio-political drama. How does your religion handle the existence of magic? Where does magic fit into your system?
Well, magic doesn't exist, so you're talking about in a theoretical one?
Well, I mean, in the context of the stories that we're writing.
Okay, then may I bring it? I don't know much about how magic works in Warhammer Fantasy, but I do know that in Perion, there are mages, and they're tied to the winds of magic. But from what I do know is that they're all trained by the Lady of the Lake. That's their backstory. Is that they're all students of the Lady of the Lake, taken by the Fey Enchantress at a young age, and when they show magical potential, to the realm, and then come back grown-up woman, being able to manipulate magic. What happens to the boys, however, is a completely different story. They remain in there.
I also like the concept of magic in the face of religion because, I mean, we talked about this in the Discord briefly, but there's the concept of the Force, for example, exists. Magic can exist within a universe, but you don't necessarily have to be pious in order to consult with it. You can consult with it through piety, but you could also harness it through, like in the Force, with anger or with some theoretical magical thing through just simple self-determination or through.
The Sith, right? I apologize. The Sith are distinctly, you would call actually non-pious in a way.
Yeah.
Right. They're what's called Promethean. And we have been dancing around like the sociological questions, which I do want to talk about. Like I really like that topic.
Right.
But the nature of magic in relation to religion, comes to the question of what actually is the magic and or the source of the magic, right? Like
does the magic come? Where does the magic come from, and how do you receive it?
Yeah, like C.S. Lewis has a really good line where he says, like, we do not burn witches because we do not burn witches because we don't not believe in we don't not burn witches because we don't believe witches exist. Because if witches did exist, and there were people who were cavorting with Satan to vex and trouble and imperil their fellow man, like we'd be right for giving them a what for, or something like that. And that's the context.
Something to that effect.
And again, by contrast, if you have magic that's not like inherently evil, quote unquote, then then you're changing things, right?
Right. So, but my point was less so about like what is the nature of the magic and what is the nature, but more about what is the nature of the individual who can harness it. Is it hard work? Is it piety? Is it fury? Is it abstinence? Is it like what is it that allows you to harness the nature of the universe, that fundamental underlying power?
And how does that affect the politics?
Yes, and effect on individual characters and on what it means to be a human.
Yeah, like in terms of how do people regulate how to become magical? Like if it's skill based or if it's genetic, how do they figure out how does the government figure out a way to weaponize it?
And all of these elements, however you derive it, can all exist within the same universe, and that can drive a cacophony of possibilities.
Yeah. This is an interesting one. How does science relate? Are these gods somehow responsible for something, or responsible for how do I say responsible for the aspects of science? And if they die, does science go out of whack? Or if they're disintegrated, does science go out of whack?
Well, yeah, what's the relationship between the billiard balls and the billiard table, basically?
Yeah.
What is the essence of each thing? When you boil it down to its fundamental elements, when does it end?
Well, there's the old Arthur C. Clarke quote that any sufficiently advanced science is indistinguishable from magic. And there's the flip side of that, which is that any sufficiently analyzed magic is indistinguishable from science.
I like those quotes.
Yeah, that's functional.
Well, on the top of the former quote, actually on that quote, I want to bring in the Endless Universe in this because it's a very confusing thing. They only had one game that's technically fantasy, but even then had elements of sci-fi, and even I ended up questioning this after examining it better on the magic system. There is only one technical faction in this legend that uses magic, and that's the Ardent Mages, and they get their power by being masochists.
What the?
I'm not joking. They literally get power. The more pain they're in, the more power they have. But the thing is that it's confusing because they consider dust to be magic in that planet, which is not true at all when you know what that dust is really just a bunch of nanomachines. It just does weird shit. Like, dust can enhance the person, dust can do this, dust can do that, and it's not clear. So whether it's magic or science, to them it's magic, but in reality it's science, but it's indistinguishable from magic.
Oh god, you just gave me such a fantastic idea to ponder. I'm not going to divert us, though.
Another,
I will say that quantum superpositions with regards to religion and magic. Yes, honey.
Another series that's like that is let's see, Magical Girl Lyrical Nanoha, actually, where the magic is done using mathematical equations. So science kind of is magic. And there are a couple of different
there's an anime where you learn more
systems, but the main one is the math is magic.
Yeah. Did Drake
my cousin is a math PhD. I think he'd very much agree with that.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the stories I'm writing now, where the magic system, the particular corner of the magic system that I'm focusing on at the moment is necromancy. But how do you actually raise up dead bodies and make them go around and do stuff? The magic that I'm coming through is actually very similar to computer science. Once you've raised the body and you have it sustained and you have the way it feeds its energy, gets its energies in and all that stuff, actually getting this thing to do useful actions, it's all computer science. You're putting algorithms into this thing and progressively refining those algorithms as you go along.
Computer science is just a branch of mathematics. So what you're like, the joke is always everything is just derived from math.
Yeah, we've all seen the XKCD cartoon.
So, do the zombies ever crash?
Well, they do. Eventually, their bodies break down.
Oh, so they have a blue screen of death.
I mean, you do eventually have to constantly poke your head around the door to make sure that they're not trying to bash their heads against the wall because their programming tells them to. But the main concern is the deterioration of the physical bodies. Like the zombies that work in a mine, they all have very good boots and very good gloves. Because their feet, they're all constantly moving around, so they have to make sure that the skin on their feet doesn't deteriorate. And as they're constantly manipulating heavy tools, then they have to make sure the skin on their hands doesn't eventually chafe off.
That actually brings me that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going on a little bit of a tangent. I think we should probably get back to philosophical stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Drake, I haven't heard you mention something. You know a shitload about this. What are your thoughts?
Science and sorcery. Oh, I think part of it is just like there's more people.
Yes, there's way too many people in this chat. I'm a decoration. I really am sitting here in a corner losing my religion.
I think I
thought this entire time you were just giant death robots.
I forgot for like a straight hour that I was here. I was making my commander deck.
I think that one thing that maybe like would be good to do maybe in future is if we have big topics like this, I should do part 1, part 2, and then do one stream with like my usual stream team, and then bring in guests for the second one. I think that would probably be a good idea.
Yeah, that sounds like it'll work.
I would tell you, like,
actually,
we're probably halfway done. Like, we have to, we should cover the sociological aspect. I mean, it's a huge thing in this concept.
Yeah, I second that motion. We do need a separate stream for the sociological implications.
I second the secondary stream.
You triple it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
I quadruple it.
Yeah. Yeah, since there's
which is good because it's getting late.
Whatever he said, I double it.
Yeah. I think I think that we'll definitely do some more later. We'll definitely do some more stuff later, but I think like creating like a philosophical religion, I think it's basically just like creating some kind of like, it's usually based around the principle of enlightenment generally.
Self-actualization, that sort of thing. Becoming one with the concept of fundamentality.
Yeah. So, and then like kind of like achieving like some kind of higher enlightenment, not necessarily like in worship, but it's usually in like becoming something better. And then there's just like an atheist religion where either like it's usually Nietzschean relation.
I sent you a better picture to use of the emperor.
The term we're looking for is mesotheism.
Yeah,
it's the hatred of God.
That's the thing. Warhammer 40K. It's not that there are no gods. It's that there are gods and they're dicks.
Especially well,
even worse than the Greeks.
Yes, even worse.
Have you met Korn?
Actually, want to know something funny, Neph? The space elves murder fucked a god into existence.
Oh yeah.
Oh no!
And this god that's been murder fucked into existence created all the bad shit to come. So thanks, Eldar.
In a fundamental way,
they should all be killed as a blood sacrifice to Korn. Blood for the blood god.
I'm just Warhammer convinced me that I should hate all aliens, so I have to kill them all because they're aliens anyways.
Aren't you an alien?
Yeah.
But
alien is relative.
In a fundamental way, I guess, and what you might say is that when defining an atheistic religion in a fantasy world, it's about deciding whether God does exist and what nature, and to what degree people in that religious context believe that, and whether God doesn't exist, and in what nature the people of that story believe that he does or doesn't.
Yeah, atheism is kind of wacky as a concept, let's say, because it's what's called a negative belief, right? It's a negative statement. It's what is not. Usually, what matters. No.
It's a rejection of a positive statement, theoretically.
Well, yes, you want to get even more time, but it's a negative belief in that kind of sense, right? What's usually more pertinent is a positive statement, right? So the Imperial Man makes positive statements about it has goals and it has a function, it has quote unquote beliefs, about its manifest destiny, about the supremacy of the human form, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Mankind sends to rule the stars. You don't believe that?
I didn't say I didn't.
Yeah. And then I think like a big part, I think that pretty much covers an atheist religion because
Soviet communism was basically
technically with the Emperor Mankind, it's more like he wished to construct a society that focused on more being reasonable assholes than what they became now.
Well, I mean, this ties into sociological questions about the nature of things.
Well, so two things. So regarding, I can't remember who said it. No, communism is not an atheist religion. It is a philosophy that relies upon atheism. And then...
Not necessarily atheism. It is
Or
an interesting.
that has previously.
It was
bled
kind of the
away.
fashion at the time when Marx was writing to criticize religion.
Yeah.
I imagine if he'd known how crucial the Baptist Church would play in the organizing of the civil rights movement in the '60s, he'd probably be singing a very different tune about religion.
Probably.
So for him, it was a tool, is what you're saying, which is
the
again,
paradigm of religion that Marx was exposed to was very much basically the strong arm of the state. It said it was basically a way to get people to just say, okay, life sucks, but that's just how it is, and there's nothing we can do about that. And Marx said, no, there is something you can do about that. And
you can overthrow the proletariat because we can divide everyone into classes. We're tangenting. That's not what I tried to do.
Has Buddhism been mentioned in terms of atheist religions? Because if I'm not mistaken, it believes in nothing.
It is a full occasionally. What's regarding that? Buddhism is not much of a religion; it's just more of a philosophical religion.
Yes.
Buddha himself was. Buddha did not believe in the gods. He didn't. He just believed in the. And then when he died, they ironically made him a god.
In eternity and in achievable perfection.
Yeah, it's a non. It doesn't posit a deity, but it's for all intents and purposes of religion.
Yeah.
But don't they essentially not believe in much? Isn't it essentially? Don't they? Someone needs to turn off whatever that thing is.
Sorry, wasn't my bad. Fuck off. Okay.
Oh, as I was saying, don't they sort of not even in matter? Like everything is kind of an illusion or something, or something along those lines.
Well, Buddhism,
or does it depend? Because
there are different about the existence or non-existence of any particular god or gods.
Yeah, but you're more
similar like that. It is some. It could potentially be like slotted into other religious traditions.
It's basically the only thing that exists is not even entities, but the interaction that occur between theoretical entities that might exist.
Oh, yeah, that sounds like what I remember reading. Okay.
Yeah, Buddhism isn't so much like a cosmology as much as it is a philosophy of the self.
The self might not exist, so it's not really a philosophy of the self. It's philosophy of what the self probably isn't.
Yeah. So I think we've kind of exhausted. I think at least we're kind of into kind of the point where would be good to enter into. Yeah, it would be good to go into like the Q&A section where kind of like people ask us more like specific questions. Do you think that would work in this panel, or do you think that like it would be better to move Q&A to another time?
I think we should probably put Q&A.
Let's just finish up Q&A.
No, I think we can field anything pertinent to what we just talked about, or if we missed something.
We do have a couple of questions already anyway. Perhaps we should take a gander at that. Nautilus Nylum. Why would someone choose to not worship a god even though it is proven in their world that the god and their blessings are real?
Because you're a fucking asshole.
Well, there's lots of actual answers to that. If anyone else would, there
is the idea that if you accept the blessing of a god, that does put a responsibility upon you to live your life in a certain way, a responsibility that you might not particularly
like or be well with.
Maybe that the god wants you to create some sort of a blood sacrifice, or wants you to go off and kill a bunch of people.
Yeah,
or I don't know, give up all your money. And you might not be inclined to do that. So you would say, okay, I'm gonna make do without the blessing.
No.
In order to maintain some control over my own destiny.
Now, all this assumes either that the god cannot force one's hand, or that the individual making the action either is acting on hubris, or that the character has sufficient power to overcome the will of a god.
Or they're
crazy. Or
just crazy.
Or a Kratos mentality where they're killing the gods.
That's fucking Kratos.
Or it could be a genuine assertion that that thing would not be a god, right? As to the issue of blessings, right? This ties into a certain point that was brought up earlier. Like Augustine, St. Augustine, right, makes a pretty an effective point in one of his works. I believe it's The City of God. He says, he makes the case that and maybe this is unfair to the pagans, but follow the analogy. The pagans worship the gods so that the gods will grant them boons and blessings. You as a Christian are not supposed to do that. You are supposed to worship God because it is the right thing to do, period. And you can say that that's silly, but that's
okay.
supposed
Hey,
to be
I
your
take
mentality.
offense to that because I'm not a Christian. I'm Jewish.
Okay, no. I mean,
I understand what you're saying. I do understand what you're saying. Go on.
Yeah, I know. And he's not, again, it's not to say that this is the only Christian. And again, you can apply this sort of non-denominationally. Like, you're supposed to do, let's abstract this out in a psychological way.
Objective morality.
Yeah, you were supposed to do the right thing because it's the right thing, not because so you gain from it, not because it'll benefit you or your society or your family or whatever. You're supposed to do the right thing for its own sake.
The classic argument is consequentialism versus deontology.
Yes, the deontological argument, exactly. Yeah, you have a duty to do the right thing, period. Not because the gods will grant or God will grant you things. Stop. That was sort of his argument. And again, you can say that it's not fair to the pagans, but the analogy holds.
Like, you're not supposed to be selfish with the belief that God owes you something. You're not owed a free sandwich.
Yeah, that you do not offer sacrifice.
It's closer that you owe God something.
Yeah, you do not
owe whatever exists that God has created something.
Yeah, you do not make a sacrifice so that God will make your harvest bountiful. You do not worship a temple so that the city becomes wealthy. That's not why you do things.
It's more so that harvests are only bountiful because of God. So why would you think that you're it could be, there's a free will argument there. That's not what I'm trying to get to, but basically just that that whether or not what you do is inherently valuable or whether it's something that you are given regardless of your own efforts or beliefs or whatever.
Yeah, grace is built into this. The whole metaphysics is built into this. There's lots into this.
But then there's also the free will and all that shit, where basically it boils down to, if you don't have that capacity, then why would you ever do anything? It's because you do have capacity. I'm not going to go into that. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a bit of a tangent.
Me and believe being part of the religion. Why won't you join a religion if it's proven that the gods exist and you can gain from it? Well,
probably because there's a price. Well, there's a price to be paid. There's a price to be paid oftentimes.
Think about it like this. I got an example right quick. Why would you join and worship the chaos gods?
Yes, that's a classic example.
Or why would you join in and worship the feathered serpent?
Or better yet, why the hell would you make a deal with Ares of all people, Kratos?
Well, yeah, so there's whether the gods might be evil and you can get benefits, but it comes with a price, or it could be that you can provably get shit from the gods, but they're drunken assholes and you don't even know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Monkey's paws.
Literally, everything that happens in the God of War games is all Kratos' fault. He chose to make a sacrifice to Ares, so I refuse to feel bad for that asshole.
Yeah, and let's not pretend. Let's not ignore the function of social pressure. If you're in a society where you worship the sun god, and worshiping the sun god requires the removal of human hearts in live performance,
yeah,
it's what you do. It's what you do. It's what you do.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I'm done.
No, well, I'm sorry. Are you sure you were done? You sound like you had another point.
You can respond.
Okay, I was gonna say, yeah, perhaps the pressures of society or the obligation of the real world overcome that which you might or can or should gain from a provable god.
Yeah, exactly. And to return to the sort of point made earlier, it's maybe you don't believe because you don't actually you don't hold that whatever you're worshiping is the ultimate, right? It's not truly divine. It's a lesser. It's an awesome power, but it's not a supreme. It's not the supreme power. Yeah. That's metaphysics.
Yeah. So provable, but not ultimate.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's nothing like in like Aristotelian Thomistic philosophy that says like Khorne can't exist, right? Like Khorne, there's Khorne. He's evil. You know, he's a big, brutish, bad red demon man. Okay, he's not. It doesn't matter. He's not God. He's just a really, really powerful thing. He's not to be worshipped. You know, and you can actually make the case, and this is really interesting with Warhammer. Like the chaos gods and like the other gods, right? You can make the case they're trying to war. They're warring to become the sort of fundamental reality of the universe, right? Like, and this is kind of like, this is extremely esoteric and weird, but like, you know, Khorne is trying to make himself, Khorne is trying to make, you know, him and his paradigm the fountain of all life, of all being, of all the universe. And so is Nurgle, and so is Tzeentch, and so is Slaanesh. And so they're at war for the very fundamentals of reality. So yeah, so that's, you know, that was a bit of a tangent, and I apologize.
No, you're fine.
Meanwhile, in the meme channel, we got a lot of stuff.
Like, I saw the meme earlier where it's basically like Slaanesh, if you worship her, you get a whole bunch of tail.
Well, the thing is that with Slaanesh, the thing about Slaanesh is that, okay, there's some sort of dichotomy with the Chaos Gods, that they need to exist, otherwise the universe will stagnate. Otherwise the universe will stop working. War needs to be a constant. Let's be honest. A lot of things that we have in society would not have come without the price of war. But the problem with Khorne is that he's all about nothing but war. Then we have Nurgle. He represents stagnation. What happens if we don't stagnate? What happens if we don't? If we eventually will stagnate? So old Nurgle too, he'll create a plague to then force us to move on ahead. But the problem is that he's just nothing but plagues. Then we have Slaanesh. We can't enjoy life without having pleasure within it. The problem with Slaanesh is that you get too much of it. Like, you're drinking too much wine when you should only have a little bit. You're fucking too much when you only should fuck a little. You're eating too much when you only should eat as much as you need to eat. You're doing all this shit when you shouldn't be doing it. And then you have Tzeentch. Tzeentch represents change. Without change, we'd be fucked. Problem with Tzeentch is he's changing shit just because.
Yeah, they're all what's called principalities, right? They're all like lesser powers, and they're maybe even like quote unquote fundamental powers, but they're contingent on their, and like, yeah,
I don't think you can consider them fundamental since they overlap.
Wait, what?
Jesus Christ, I went on a tangent.
I said I don't think you can call them fundamental because they overlap. So conflict and change
they're not
have overlap.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No. That's even they're again, maybe fundamental is not the right word, but they're sort of like they're incomplete. The paradigm that they would create, let's say, is incomplete to sort of explain the universe as it seems to exist, right? So they're incomplete powers.
Right. So that's kind of the point, is that with they could be incomplete powers. So if the gods of your universe don't fundamentally explain how the universe exists, then they must not be the ultimate power. And if they are, then they're in conflict with each other. And that conflict could describe why your world is the way it is.
Yeah.
But also, I have a pretentious faggoty point to make. As I usually do. So you described war as like this fundamental element of like some god. I can't recall. Khorne, yes. So you said war was the fundamental of his belief of what existence is?
Yeah.
It's sort of his domain.
Right.
Yeah,
obviously belief. Go ahead.
Okay, fighting, bloodshed, consistent violence. It's just anything that has to do with the general act of murdering someone in over 200 different flavors. That's Khorne.
Okay. Well, I would say yes. I would say war is kind of the conglomeration of those, perhaps, only with the element of cooperation, obviously. So, but before all of that is conflict, which is what causes adaptation. So all these gods seem to be forming for the nature of adaptation.
Also, I want to point out what the Nihilist Nihilism said. Good point, by the way. If you want to discuss the Chaos Gods, you should watch TTS Warp Grumble King. Despite the fact that TTS is a parody series, it actually nails itself on Warhammer lore pretty well. And it does make a good point with the Chaos Gods in that episode. It's on episode 23, I think. Let me check. Let me find it right quick.
Yeah.
Oh no, episode 19. That's it.
Yeah.
It points out the good parts about the Chaos Gods, despite their inherent evil nature.
Yeah.
Can chaos inherently be called evil?
No.
Well, this ties into like the nature of evil, the nature of the potent act. You know, this ties as much into cosmology as philosophy, and also to the sociology aspect. Like the characterization of chaos as evil in Warhammer is actually it's actually one of the things I like the least about the setting, for various reasons. You know, order. Yes, okay, order is a prerequisite to society, and it is. But we know order can become corrupted. This is what we call tyranny.
You're assuming that order is inherently good.
Yeah, I'm not assuming. No, I'm not assuming order is inherently good. I'm asserting that it's prerequisite to society. It's not prerequisite to good society, because we know that tyranny can exist. So the way I like to characterize it in a point that's way more faggot than anything you could make up in this talk.
Excuse me, sir. Can be way more faggoty than you. Don't check me.
Here to throw that. No. The way I like to characterize.
Everyone, put your dicks back in your pants. You can talk about how gay you guys are later.
All right, we can be gay a little later, guys. Well, faggoty doesn't mean gay, sir. How dare you?
Good.
Exactly. But
I already forgot. It's also the rare sniper having a smoke, so you guys can smoke wherever you want later.
Smoke. The point I was making
was the meatballs as well. Fun fact, they're like
Scorpio, let Scorpio talk.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
No, you were making an actual point. We're just being assholes.
No, it's fine. It's not the end of the world. But the point I was making was that the way I like to categorize it is a dichotomy of water and stone. Stone being order, water being chaos. Right? You can't. And chaos is like pre-order in a way, because order can only be imposed. Water is necessary for the sustaining of life. You need it, but you can't shape it. You can't make tools out of it. You can't make structures out of it. And don't bring me igloos. You can't actually use them in any way, but it's necessary. And then you have stone, and stone can be incredibly useful as building, as tools, as anything. We can use it to write, even, et cetera, et cetera. But without it, but it can become a prison. It can become dry. It can become unlife sustaining. And so the objective of human society, let's say, is to create a system where you can and again you can drown, but you can also drown in water. So the objective of society is to find a balancing act between chaos and order, so that you're constantly cleansing the stone with water. And the key of society is not stone or water; it's the method by which you constantly clean the stone, or the method by which you constantly update order and make it healthy. The methodology is what is important, not necessarily the balance, let's say. So there's my point.
Yin and yang can exist, but the method by which you keep that circle spinning is what creates the ideal society in that sort of philosophy.
Not just society, but even your own thinking. If you get too chaotic in your thinking, or you get too close-minded in your thinking.
State of existence.
Blasphemy, huh?
Speaking of which, that's actually a very good question to ask.
If you're the blasphemy religions, it probably is part of one of my other religious curious how you would create that stuff, make cartoons, taking it like move much.
I think kind of looking to actual history for your inspiration for blasphemy. Because essentially with
they get kind of extreme when they talk about that. Not heresy.
The last time we ever talked, remember, blasphemy led to war once.
Yeah, blasphemy has led to war multiple times.
Yeah. Wasn't there entire wars based around blasphemy?
Yeah, essentially like the Albigensian Crusade with the Cathars. That's very much an example of war based on religion.
That in the entirety of Europe, then Europe just hating each other.
Crusades themselves.
Yeah, the Crusade. Well, the Crusade is the Crusade themselves is not necessarily blasphemy based. It was more of this particular
No, I'm talking about what happened to the Templars.
You mean the burning of the Templars by the French king?
Yes.
Oh, so he could get their money, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. That. Yeah.
He
that
claimed,
was. No, go ahead.
he claimed heresy and blasphemy when they hadn't done anything.
So, yeah, well, that plays into the thing I was
Yeah.
going to say, is that blasphemy basically only, at its definition, if I recall, is essentially just a rejection of absolute doctrine.
Yeah, if we, go ahead, sorry.
So, whether or not that doctrine is viable, as we've been talking about before, whether or not that doctrine is viable or true or clearly defined or even any of that is up to the nature of the work itself. But blasphemy simply only represents a person who is going against the order, going against an order of, or a zeitgeist or whatever, that everyone believes. So even if you have an atheistic society that doesn't inherently hold atheism as its own, like the thing they hold in highest regard, you can still blaspheme by going against the supreme zeitgeist of the society.
Yeah, exactly. Like this ties in very much into sociological functions. This is not particularly. We're so familiar with it in religious contexts, but I mean, you can just look at certain things in modern society. There are certain opinions that are anathema, and they will get you. There will be a response against certain things, and this is just how societies. This is how societies function for a long time. Like if you say something that is against the paradigm, get smacked, and sometimes it's way worse than getting smacked.
Rocking the boat to one of the higher degrees of the to a degree that most of society would dislike.
You might lose an eye, or you might lose a couple of teeth,
or your skin.
God damn it! You beat me
or
to
your
it.
heart.
Yeah.
How dare you be a virgin? Give me that heart, bitch.
Dude, stay away from her.
Yeah. I think in terms of like blasphemy, I think blasphemy is very different than heresy. Heresy is generally like a differing belief system from the norm.
Yeah, they do have a very technical. Yeah.
Blasphemy
there's also heresy.
There's blasphemy in a lot is very different than that. Blasphemy is generally the treatment of the sacred as profane, usually. Like historically the death of Christ was because of the fact that he was to the Jewish religion, he was a blasphemer by claiming that he was the Son of God. That's just factually how it worked. And you have this, you can have a blasphemer where they're like actively saying stuff that goes against the paradigm or the norm. You can also have parts where they're like, holy cow, this guy needs to die because X, Y, and Z. Like they're a threat to the religion or whatever.
Would you say that blasphemy is more of a 180, whereas heresy is a 90-degree?
I'm looking at the etymologies of the words right now. Heresy is interesting. It's one of the definitions of the ancient Greek hareseos is a school of thought, a sect, and a system of principles. So, whereas blasphemy means to insult, to slander, to profane.
Yeah.
So the idea of blasphemy is more of a just like a like a bomb thrower at society, whereas heresy would actually be a subversive, a much more conspiratorial.
An offshoot versus a contradiction.
Well,
that's more.
That's a good way of thinking about it.
A blasphemy is more a matter of the will. Heresy is a more a matter of the ideas. I mean, there's will involved in that too, but it's a blasphemer doesn't necessarily contradict the idea, the basic idea.
Yeah, to blaspheme is to like want to like destroy the Catholic Church. Heresy is like a Christian, but not a correct Christian, right? Like that's kind of how that kind of works. You know, it's a subtle distinction.
I remember there was a routine that that Penn Jillette used to do about the idea of Satan worshippers. Like someone actually worshiping Satan. He says, okay, this is a person who believes in Christianity, believes all the doctrines, and understands that the only way to go to salvation is through all this stuff. And they have come to the logical conclusion to go with the other guy.
It's silly, right? Like you're willingly doing evil, like that, and that's like real Satan. That's quote unquote real Satanism. Like what usually Satanism is, and I hate to do this, is what's called Levian Satanism, which is more like self-worship, which is, we can talk about that, but that's a different kind of thing. But like it's silly, right? It's totally different.
Hedonism typically does not.
Levian Satanism, yeah, Levian Satanism is like Promethean hedonism. It's gotcha. Roughly, it's that's kind of all that stuff. Like, but with the Satanism point about Pendulette, like you're correct. It's like you're willingly following the thing that's supposed to be bad. Like, what are you doing? Like, this is silly.
I don't know. Ask Ishamael.
Yeah, I know. It's
yeah, it's basically blasphemy is like you shake your fist at the air and say God does not exist, or God is God is awful, or
God is dead.
Defacing
this is a good summation.
God is dead might be in between.
Well, it's basically like he says that God is lost importance and meaning in the lives of people in general.
Right. Yeah. Which is what I'm saying could be both.
Yeah, heresies can be blasphemies.
I give it that 2020 it's God's punishment to us for not doing something.
Yeah.
We just haven't figured out what he wants yet.
But yeah, then you were saying that blasphemy is sorry, you're saying heresy was something different?
Me? Or...
Dunn was in the middle of the thought before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, essentially, heresy is you believe in God, but it's just not the correct belief in God.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
That's sort of the technical...
Yeah, you believe, but it's just not quite right. You're just off by a little bit, generally.
So Becca... you're saying that I don't know how to highlight this shit. That
it's a host only thing.
Yeah,
it's
you
a
can't
host
do
only privilege.
Yeah, so you can't do shit.
Damn it. So yeah, that's what I was just saying about God is dead. Is that how you feel, or do you think you have a different middle ground interpretation of what is right and wrong with regards to?
I don't actually believe he's dead. I just I'm acting.
You don't believe in that's fine.
Heresies can also be blasphemies. They're not mutually exclusive.
I'm curious as to what Becca's interpretation is.
Yeah.
It's probably right on the board between blasphemy and heresy.
Yeah. Like God is dead, as I was saying.
Blasphemy is arrogance, insult, or rudeness towards God. Heresy is wrong belief in God, or any idea that is strong against destroying beliefs in God in a particular area, so that Huey Long, aka the Kingfish.
Yeah,
we already
supposedly there's a famous story. I'm pretty sure this is about Saint Nicholas, Santa Claus, where they're at one of the big ecumenical councils of the early church, and this guy says something. I believe he promotes. He says something about. He says he promotes Arianism, which, to make the long story short, is it reduces Christ to a creature instead of godhood, and he got so mad, flipped out, and he punched the guy. He almost punched the guy.
Yeah. Yeah,
because he considered it to be blasphemy.
Yeah, just wait. We're going to be chatting about a movie that goes into that. It goes into it really badly, but it will go into it.
Oh dear, what movie is that?
Kirk Cameron's Saving Christmas.
Oh, that one.
Hey, get the rope and hang me. It's a holiday, so get me the sweet embrace of death.
Why would you make fun of Kirk Cameron? He's a genius.
Can't you just watch Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? I relate to him on so many levels.
Muhammad was not the last prophet. Kirk Cameron is.
Hey, Brett, I'm going to be sending you a gift in the mail. I want you to just use it on yourself.
Yeah, me, Valerian, and Neph already watched the trailer, and we'll be releasing the reaction to that. I think tomorrow, actually. But essentially, Kirk Cameron's nuts. And this is kind of the proof. It's just Kirk Cameron. Why do you think this? No other Christians think like this. No other people think like this. Yeah, basically, whenever you see a Christmas tree, think you're seeing a cross.
The fuck?
Becca has an interesting point. What is the difference between being a heretic, a blasphemer, and creating a whole new religion? Where does that line fall?
Yeah, she's talking about sex.
Since my analogy was 90 degrees and 180, what is that, 270, I guess?
That
as
might
far as
be
Catholics are concerned,
360.
Protestants are heretics. So it really very much is in the eye of the beholder. It's a relative decision.
Yeah, it's not. They're not mutually exclusive in any way. Like this. There could be a priest in your universe who looks at this thing that's being proposed and says that is obviously it's a heresy, but it's also a blasphemy.
Yeah.
It's two different aspects of the same thing, I guess.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Brett, did you get it?
It's like the idea that
I've got a reaction
if it succeeds.
Yeah. Yeah, a religion creator is a heretic with more work ethic, essentially. Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
You're not.
You're not
not
wrong.
inaccurate.
Shit.
Or what was the phrase? A cult is just a religion with no political power.
There's a few.
I've heard it as a cult. A religion is just a cult that people forgot who invented it.
No, I think the cult. The one I've heard is that the difference between religion and a cult is that the religion has a dead guy at the head of it.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
No, that's not the best I got. It was supposed to be a gift.
That's my response to you.
Well, this has been fun. I think we'll probably end it here and probably do some I think one thing kind of if you're suggesting topics in the Discord, I think that could you please suggest specific elements of the thing if it's a broad topic.
Sorry,
if it's a broad topic like religion and fantasy, it would be really nice if you could talk about specific elements, because if it's just general, it might get a little bit confusing. I think from now on I'm going to put a strict 8-person. I'm gonna do. I think if a lot of people want to be on a specific thing, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just gonna say, okay, we'll have if there's say 5 or more, 3 or more people who would like to be on aside from the usual stream team, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, let's have 2 streams about it where both groups of people get to talk about what they want to talk about. Does that sound like a good idea?
Well, it's a little tricky. Because if it's a whole new topic, well, then it's a different topic, and people want to talk about that. But depends.
It depends.
We didn't say much about our own use in our own works. Religion, at least that I heard. So maybe we can do another stream on that specifically.
Yeah, okay. So if we're talking about quote unquote stream topics, we did not go into the sociological sort of impacts of these things, which I would love to do, but obviously we're out of time. There's obviously the way we do them, or you guys do them yourselves, or I do my own writing, but whatever. So there's that. There are a few other topics here, but
it's pretty broad. I mean, what even counts as a religion and what doesn't?
Mhm.
Well, that's
That's a good question.
That's a whole other.
Alrighty.
Well, what
I
are
want to
what
thank
types of
my.
religions and all that? It gets messy.
Well, I want to thank my guests. Thank you all for coming, and we're going to say goodnight, folks. Adios.
See ya.
Night.
Bye.
See you.
Night.
Bye.
Night, night.